Hi all, welcome to another video. This is a build I put together for somebody that's just wants a basic office machine with a bit of gaming. So first off, looking at the case, it's an Aerocool CS-1103. Now this was one of the cheapest new cases I could find online, so I picked this up. It's pretty standard size. I suppose you'd call it a medium tower case. It's got quite smooth lines. Looking at the front, it's got a slot for a DVD rewriter drive, but I didn't include one in this build because the external ones are cheap anyway. On top, it's got power switch, two USB 2 and one USB 3 port. Got a reset button, microphone, headphone sockets. So moving around the side. Now on this machine, the coolant at the front, there's not really any sort of ventilation that an intake fan would make use of. So what I've done is I've put a 120mm fan in the side as an intake, as you can see there, and to help with cooling. And moving around the back, that's the power switch, and there's a fan on the power supply as well. Motherboard connections are the usual PS2 mouse and keyboard connections, but really USB are used now. It's got a DVI and VGA, but because we've got a graphics card on this build, those ports won't be used. USB 3 and USB 2, Ethernet, microphone, headphone sockets. Moving on to the graphics card, it's a GTX 950 with 2GB of VRAM. It's got two DVI ports, one display port and one HDMI port. It's a dual socket card, and that's other expansion slots. So what I'll do is I'll open this up so you can see the inside. There's two screws to undo each side panel, so you undo those and then this just pulls off like that. Now I've got the fan attached to a splitter cable with a rear fan, because there's only a single chassis fan on that motherboard, but that seems to be a decent enough solution. I haven't quite sorted out the cable management yet, so I'll put some cable ties in there just to tie everything out of the way. There's plenty of room for the graphics card. It's got two sticks of 8GB in total, two sticks of 4GB DDR3 1600 MHz RAM. That motherboard will only support speeds of up to 1600. Now I think it might support up to 32GB, but for this build it's 8GB in total. It's got a 120GB SSD drive and a 1TB drive for programs and storage. There wasn't much cleaning up to be done on that CPU, fan and cooler and motherboard, so all I did was just replace the thermal paste on the CPU. And as with all my builds, I always replace the CMOS battery because a lot are quite old now. Okay, so what I'll do, the power supply is a 400 watt power supply, which is enough to run a graphics card like that. Now I could have put in a slightly more powerful one, something like a 960 or a 970, but with the high prices of graphic cards at the moment and for what this machine is going to be used for, I think a 950 is more than enough, and that's a twin fan as well. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll start this up, run some benchmarks. First up, this is Battlefield 5, and it's one of the latest in the comprehensive Battlefield series. And as with a lot of these games, there's many graphical resolution and performance options you can select. So I've selected the top resolution, and the game's defaulted a lot of the settings to on, and we're getting a respectable mid-40s frames per second in this outdoor area. I'll try and get a few characters moving and get a firefight going. So yeah, with 1 or 2 characters on the screen, approaching 50 frames per second. I suppose you can adjust them even more and get 60, but I'm quite happy with mid-40s on this one. It's a nice looking game, this is. If you've never played Battlefield 5, I suggest you check it out. Okay, so that's Battlefield 5. This is Call of Duty Warzone. Now, it's renowned for not being a very well optimised game. So what I've done is I've put it onto a lower tiered graphical resolution and all the quality settings onto low, and indoors we're getting mid-40s. So you could probably adjust them to suit your taste, really. There's not much firefight going on, so moving outside. Now in some of these games, there's, when you start adjusting the settings, there's actually a VRAM limit indicator shown, so it gives you a helping hand in adjusting those settings without going over your graphic card's VRAM limit. So just moving out even more into the open. So yeah, it's nudging 60 frames per second. Not very good at this game. So yeah, you can definitely adjust those settings accordingly. Right, so that's Call of Duty Warzone. Now to answer the age-old question, can it run Crysis? Yes, it can. This is actually Crysis 3 on the highest resolution, and a lot of the settings are set to high, but not very high. And moving into this indoor level, it's a pretty stable 60 frames per second, and this engine still stands up even today, the Crytek engine, or enhanced Crytek engine. You may even therefore get away with setting everything to very high, but I'm quite happy having this set to high and the highest resolution. Some decent effects in this game. Now, I could be wrong, but I think there's going to be another Crysis game. Can't be sure. Hope so. I'm sure it'll test a lot of the more up-to-date PCs. Okay, so that's Crysis 3. This is Cyberpunk. Now you really are stretching the 2 gig VRAM limit on this game. So I've got majority, if not all, the settings on low, but not the lowest resolution. And this outdoor level with not much going on, 30 frames per second. So just get in this car and do a bit of driving. I suppose in the city or the built-up areas where there's lots of activity, then that frame rate's gonna go down considerably, and you may even have to put the resolution down even further. I'll see if I can get to a more built-up area Now this is an indoor firefight, so we're getting nudging 30 frames per second, which is fine. What I'll do is later on I'll try and get to an outside crowd scene, because that's when the system will really be taxed. Now in this section I'm not actually driving this car, but the frame rate's probably mid-20s as it's outside, and there's lots of effects including weather. Now I've set the crowd density to medium, so maybe I could get that counter up slightly if I reduce the crowd density, but to be honest there's not that many people at the moment. Okay, so this is Cyberpunk, and it's just a firefight started, and that is just hovering above 20. And this is Doom Eternal. Now I did notice in the settings when I selected the option to put them all to the quality to medium, it had a vram warning limit, so I couldn't change those, so I've put it onto low, all the settings onto low, but not the lowest resolution, and it seems to be holding pretty steady at 60 frames per second, which is pretty good. I'll probably be able to put the resolution up slightly, and maybe the count will probably go down, but it's what you're most comfortable with. It's a well optimized game anyway, so it's good that even if you've got a setup like this where the graphics card has got a 2 gig limit, you can still get relatively decent frame rates, and it still looks quite good anyway, even at all low settings. Okay, so that's Doom Eternal. Now a good thing about a setup like this is you can go back to previous games where maybe your system couldn't play these on highest level settings or even at all. This is Fear 3, and rock solid 60 frames per second with a few characters on the screen, and all the settings set to maximum. So as I said, just return to some of these games and just bump those settings up. I think this is the last game in the Fear series. I think there's 1 or 2 games in it, and there's a few expansion packs as well. But it still holds up, I think, anyway. Okay, so that's Fear 3 at 60 frames per second.